Shalom. I would like to give all reverence, due benevolence, worship, honor, praise, and glory unto the Most High God, whose name is Yahweh, and his only begotten Son, whose name is Yahweh Shai. This is an exhortation to you Israelites to not be false witnesses against your brethren, and to not be false witnesses at all. We are given hundreds of commandments in the first 5 books that were written by Moses in the Bible, being Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And one of them is to not be a false witness. So I'll get it straight out of the commandments first. Then I will precept that with that which is found in the book of Deuteronomy to reinforce the commandment, and then I'll give some accounts from the scriptures that show why being a false witness is so wicked and really damaging to our nation and why it must not be done. So this is the book of Exodus, chapter 23. And I'm gonna give verse 1. It says, "Thou shalt not raise a false report. Put not thine hand with the wicked to be an unrighteous witness." So just think about your personal life and all the ways that you can raise a false report. There are 2 that should come to your mind off top. The first being, if you're in the workplace, you could raise a false report against one of your coworkers or against your boss for committing a heinous act or a sexual act that was inappropriate, or for saying something that you deem to be offensive, which could not be true. And we see this transpire in big industries and like the entertainment industry, for example, because that's what's largely covered in the press. So we get to follow that, where we see, for example, head coaches and athletes get accused for sexual misconduct, for domestic violence. And a lot of the times these men, and in the case of women too, if they've been accused in the women's sports circuit or entertainment circuit, a lot of the times they are guilty of what they've done, and surveillance footage may catch them. But there are instances where false accusations have been brought up and they have damaged athletes' careers, their reputations, their images. Now, I use that example because it's something that we can all use as a reference point. But that is to say, when we raise false reports, we can bring about we can heap upon others disparaging comments that can damage their reputation forever, because we have to understand that there's also something called a court of public opinion. But beyond that, strictly when it comes to the standpoint of the scriptures, if we are found to be false witnesses, then number 1, we are liars. And what does it tell us? What does it tell us in the book of Leviticus? Let me get that. Bear with me while I get the precept that I'm looking for. This is the book of Leviticus, chapter 19, and verse 11. It says, "Ye shall not steal, neither deal falsely, neither lie one to another." So when you raise a false report, not only are you a liar and you're in the transgression, especially if it's against your own brethren, but we're not supposed to do so in any wise. But you could also send someone to jail, in these times. And depending on what you raised a false report about back in antiquity, when the scriptures were written, when they were given unto the holy men of the Lord, the prophets, to dispense unto our people, you could be put to death. So I mentioned the workplace, and sexual misconduct, but with that comes adultery. Because if a woman is accused of sleeping with another man who's not her husband, or if a man is accused of sleeping with another woman who is married, then back when Moses received the commandment from the Lord, that man or that woman would be put to death. And so when you raise a false report, you could cause someone to be put to death for something that they did not do. So I'll read it, Exodus 23:1 again. Thou shalt not raise a false report. Put not thine hand with the wicked to be an unrighteous witness. And that's what they did to our Lord Yahushua HaMashiach. They were the Israelites, the Jews in Jerusalem. They raised false reports against him and accused him of things that he did not do. There was no guile found in his mouth, neither was there any deceit. And yet they incessantly called for Pilate to crucify him. Now, still in the book of Exodus, chapter 23, this is now verse number 7. It says, keep thee far from a false matter, and the innocent and righteous slay thou not, for I will not justify the wicked. So false matters can lead the innocent and righteous to get slayed. As I just mentioned, we're not supposed to deal with false matters because we are supposed to walk uprightly. That is part of what makes us a holy nation and a peculiar people unto our power. When we are found lying and doing deceitful works under the table, we need to think about the lives that we may impact. So if you work in corporate America, or any job for that matter, but specifically if you work a white collar job, and you are in a position where you can accuse someone to human resources of something that either they did not do or you're blowing over the top, then you need to strongly consider what it is that you approach HR about, so that you're not causing someone to lose their job, because that is their livelihood. And that is also a form of oppression. We can't oppress the widow and the fatherless, for example. And let's say you're working with a woman who, she lost her husband to, whether it was, I'm just throwing a few examples out there, whether it's health issues like colon cancer, which plagues Southern Kingdom, or let's just say, as unfortunate as it is, if her husband was in a gang or doing some shady business, and for whatever reason, she lost her husband, and she's working, and you raise a false report against her and she loses her job, you are also oppressing a widow. So you need to be very careful about that. Now, the same thing also applies to if you raise false reports and false accusations to the police. And that can be for a great many things. Children can raise false reports against their parents for physically abusing them, which many of us would just call a good old fashioned butt whooping. But I'm sure, if you're Black, Hispanic, and Native American, you know what do they call it now? CPS, ACS, whatever it is. You know about those agencies far too well. And if you were one of those kids who acted up in an egregious manner when you were young, and your parents put the belt on you or they disciplined you physically, then when you go and report your parents, let's say you report them for like threatening to take your life, or situations like that can be taken with a grain of salt, because if you really lay it on your child, then you need to know where to draw the line. But the point I'm trying to make is, if you accuse your parents for physical abuse that they did not do, for example, because we're dealing strictly with false matters, and then you what you could do is cause the government to sever your family. On another token, if you accuse someone of stealing from you, the same thing applies. There are just a great many things that someone can accuse another person of doing. But I really want to harp on the accusation of adultery because that's something that causes a lot of dispute. Whether you're in this walk, new to this faith, years in it, not in the knowledge of the truth of your heritage, fully submerged in the world, adultery is a major point of contention that can cause major strife. So we need to be careful of that which it is we are taking up against others. And this may not be an everyday thing for people. I mean, when I'm trying my best to exhort brethren to start by keeping commandments that they can do right away. And of course, this is one that you can do right away if you have a history and a track record of being a false witness and it cuts your spirit. But there are things such as the Sabbath day, which you have to keep on a weekly basis, from Friday night at sundown to Friday evening at sundown to Saturday evening at sundown. You have to keep the Shabbat. No work, no kindling fires in your habitation, things like that. You can reference that video, which is on my platform. The same thing applies to not balding your head, another video which I put up where if you're a man who is losing your hair and you make it a regular occurrence to use a razor to shave your head, maybe every 2, 3, 4 days, whatever it is, once a week, then you need to stop that. And that's routinely. Raising false matters is something that is more situational. But whether it is situational or routine, we are supposed to keep all of the commandments as best as we possibly can, according to the word. So that is not to... So we are not supposed to look over certain commandments and say, oh, because that doesn't necessarily come up in my life very often, or I haven't dealt with that in my past, I don't need to regard the commandment of the Lord, and nothing could be further from the truth. So raising a false report is definitely one that we all need to take heed unto. And there's an example of a false report that was raised that almost costed an individual her life. And we can find that in the book of History of Susanna. But before I get History of Susanna, I want to double down on that in the book of Deuteronomy chapter 19. Because there's nuance into how we are supposed to judge and how we are supposed to determine matters based off of who brought up accusations against who. So I'll just let the word speak. This is Deuteronomy chapter 19 and verse 15. One witness shall not rise up against a man for any iniquity or for any sin, and any sin that he sinneth. At the mouth of 2 witnesses or at the mouth of 3 witnesses shall the matter be established. And this is very important. The Lord is a righteous judge. Because if one person could take up witness against another, then anybody could just accuse anybody of anything, and anyone could theoretically be put to death. For example, if I had malice in my heart toward my next door neighbor, for example, and I wanted to, if we were propped up in our kingdom and able to execute the law the way it is written, and I wanted to get this man killed out of spite, I could accuse him of that. I could accuse him and say that I saw him committing adultery with the next man's wife. And if only my word was good enough to indict him and to place upon him that guilty stamp, that man would be put to death. But this is why the Lord says we need to judge at the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, because if there are multiple people who testify unto an individual committing a crime, transgressing the law, I should say, then there's credence, there's grounds for an investigation to be made, because now it's all right, the probability or the likelihood that this person actually did this is relatively high. Now, that's not to say that there aren't people who can band together with their friends or their I'll just use the word friends, band together with their friends or their loved ones who share a like mind in trying to destroy another person, who can't just, again, band together and raise a false accusation against someone. But the point is, 2 or 3 witnesses gives grounds and credence to really look into and investigate what actually went down. And if multiple people saw it and there's enough evidence to prove based off of what the judges deem to be the correct judgment, then judgment can be executed accordingly. But reading on, this is Deuteronomy 19, picking up at verse 16. It says, if a false witness rise up against any man to testify against him that which is wrong, then both the men between whom the controversy is shall stand before the Lord, before the priests and the judges, which shall be in those days, which I just alluded to. Verse 18, and the judges shall make diligent inquisition, and behold, if the witness be a false witness and hath testified falsely against his brother, then shall ye do unto him as he had thought to have done unto his brother. So shalt thou put the evil away from among you. And those which remain shall hear and fear, and shall henceforth commit no more any such evil among you. And thine eye shall not pity, but life shall go for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. So that's why a lot of the Lord's judgments are so harsh and severe, because we're supposed to see what happens when people of our nation commit evil acts, commit iniquity, because it's supposed to serve as an example for us not to do those things. When we see that sins such as adultery or bestiality, which again, bestiality is not all too common, but still happens. When we see that sins such as this are punishable by death, that's supposed to invoke fear in us to walk in that straight path and that straight way, so that doesn't become us and that we don't enrage and anger the Lord. So a false witness gets done to him what he thought to have done unto his brother. And that is a righteous judgment that is ordained from the Lord to be done unto false witnesses. So we really need to watch our tongues. Now, I'll close out with an account in the scriptures that shows what happened to 2 unrighteous witnesses who accused an innocent woman of something she didn't do. So this is the book of history of Susanna. And I'm just going to pick a few precepts to just get to the point and explain, to fill in the details. So I'm going to pick up, this is the book of history of Susanna, chapter 1 and verse 7. It says, now when the people departed away at noon, Susanna went into her husband's garden to walk. So Susanna's a married woman. So she's supposed to be faithful to her husband and her husband only. Verse 8, and the 2 elders saw her going in every day and walking, so that their lust was inflamed toward her. So now we have 2 peeping Toms. Reading on, verse 9, and they perverted their own mind and turned away their eyes, that they might not look unto heaven nor remember just judgments. And albeit they both were wounded with her love, yet durst not one show another his grief. So these 2 peeping Toms, they're both lusting after Susanna, and they keep looking at her walk into her husband's garden on the daily. And neither of them are telling one another how much they're just going crazy over the fact that, she's a very fair woman to look upon. Reading on. For they were ashamed to declare their lust that they desired to have to do with her. Yet they watched diligently from day to day to see her. And the one said to the other, let us now go home, for it is dinner time. So when they were gone out, they parted one from another, and turning back again, they came to the same place. And after that they had asked one another the cause, they acknowledged their lust, then appointed a time both together when they might find her alone. So envision that They were watching her on a daily basis. One day they both said, all right, let's just go home and go eat dinner. Let's just give it a rest. They both separated from one another, acting like they were going home, and they both ended up circling back to keep watching her. And it's not funny. They circled back to keep watching her. And once they caught each other, both like moving deviously, they both admitted to each other, yeah, I'm trying to get with that. And the other one was like, I'm trying to get with that too, which is extremely wicked. First of all, she's a married woman. So that lust is them. They're lusting after a married woman in their heart, which our Lord Yahweh Shai Mashiach tells us you already commit adultery with a woman if you do that. And on top of that, we see that the seeds of lust can breed about what? Let's see. Verse 15, and it fell out as they watched the fit time. She went in as before with 2 maids only, and she was desirous to wash herself in the garden, for it was hot. And there was nobody there save the 2 elders that had hid themselves and watched her. So now this is getting dangerous because she's about to take a bath in the garden. So, use your brain. She's about to get naked. And it's just them and it's just her and the 2 elders. So we know how situations like that can transpire. A woman with 1 man alone could very well get raped. 2 men, let's just keep reading. It's very grim. Then she said to her maids, bring me oil and washing balls and shut the garden doors that I may wash me. So I'm going to jump down a few verses. This is verse 19. Now when the maids were gone forth, the 2 elders rose up and ran unto her, saying, behold, the garden doors are shut, that no man can see us, and we are in love with thee. Therefore consent unto us, and lie with us. If thou wilt not, we will bear witness against thee that a young man was with thee, and therefore thou didst send away thy maids from thee. Then Susanna sighed and said, I am straitened on every side, for if I do this thing, it is death unto me, and if I do it not, I cannot escape your hands. So, my goodness, think about what's going on here. Cogitate upon this. They ran unto her, and they professed their love for her, and they said, it's either you have sex with us now, or we're going to falsely accuse you of having adultery with a younger man. So not only are they wicked in that they wanted to commit adultery, it's just wicked on so many levels. But they also were willing to lie and put and heap a transgression that she didn't commit, that they wanted her to commit with them unto another man. So now they would be willing and ready to accuse a random man of committing adultery with her. And not only she would be put to death, but that man too. This would be a man who doesn't even know what's going on. He's not even in the vicinity. So that's why it's very dangerous. So, and that's why Susanna said, if I do this thing, it is death unto me. That's the punishment for adultery. And she said, if I do it not, I cannot escape your hands. So she said, verse 23, it is better for me to fall into your hands and not do it than to sin in the sight of the Lord. With that, Susanna cried with a loud voice, and the 2 elders cried out against her. So she did what she was supposed to. When a man grabs a woman in the city, as the scriptures tell us, and that's the verbiage that's used, but if a man grabs a woman and is about to lie with her forcefully and she cries out, then the man is in the wrong and he's to be punished according to the law. So I'm going to just get to the judgment, because Daniel was propped up to judge this matter. So I'm going to get verse 34. It says, then the 2 elders stood up in the midst of the people and laid their hands upon her head. And she, weeping, looked up to heaven, for her heart trusted in the Lord. And the elders said, as we walked into the garden alone, alone, this woman came in with two maids and shut the garden doors and sent the maids away. Then a young man who there was hid came unto her and lay with her. Then we that stood in a corner of the garden, seeing this wickedness, ran unto them. Now jumping down, Daniel is going to get to the bottom of this. This is verse 51 now. It says, Then said Daniel unto them, Put these two aside, one from another, and I will examine them. So when they were put asunder from one another, he called one of them and said unto him, O thou that art waxen old in wickedness, now thy sins which thou hast committed afore are come to light. For thou hast pronounced false judgment, and hast condemned the innocent, and hast led the guilty, and hast let the guilty go free. Albeit the Lord saith, The innocent and the righteous shall thou not slay. That's what we just read in the commandment. In the book of Exodus. So why did Daniel say this? Because he separated the two men. And let's see what it says. Verse 54, Now then, if thou hast seen her, tell me under what tree sawest thou them companying together? So he's saying, all right, if you saw this man having sex with this woman in adultery, what tree were they under? Who answered, Under a mastic tree. And Daniel said, Very well, thou hast lied against thine own head, for even now the angel of God hath received the sentence of God to cut thee in two. So he put him aside and commanded to bring the other, and said unto him, O thou seed of Canaan, and not of Judah, beauty hath deceived thee, and lust hath perverted thine heart. So why did he say that? Because one man had said that he saw them under a mastic tree. But let's see what the other man said. Bear with me a moment while I get that precept. Continuing on, just right in the flow of things. Verse 57, Thus have ye dealt with the daughters of Israel, and they for fear companied with you, but the daughter of Judah would not abide your wickedness. Now therefore tell me, under what tree didst thou take them companying together? Who answered, Under a holm tree. Then said Daniel unto him, Well, thou hast also lied against thine own head, for the angel of God waiteth with the sword to cut thee in two, that he may destroy you. So there it is. Daniel was wise. He said, okay, these two men are saying that they saw a man commit adultery with Susanna. I bet. I'm going to separate them two, and I'm going to say, which tree did you see them under? And they both said different trees. So if they were right there next to each other as they claimed, they should have seen it under the same tree. Great investigative work, great judgment on the part of Daniel, great utilization of the commandment, which we read in the book of Exodus and in the book of Deuteronomy. And as a result, those two men had to bear their iniquity. And that's what it says in verse number, I'll just read out the rest of the chapter. It's just 4 more verses. With that, all the assembly cried out with a loud voice and praised God, who saveth them that trust in him. And they arose against the two elders, for Daniel had convicted them of false witness by their own mouth. And according to the law of Moses, they did unto them in such sort as they maliciously intended to do to their neighbor. And they put them to death. Thus the innocent blood was saved the same day. I'll stop there. So that's what happens. In this day and time, we have a lot of people accusing one another of adultery. A lot of people accusing one another of sexual misconduct in the workplace, in the home. A lot of people raising false reports about all manner of infidelity as well as other wicked acts. Like I said, theft or physical abuse or whatever the case is. Some people may even accuse others of spreading rumors, which we can't do because we can't bear tales and divulge secrets that were told unto us in confidence. So this has been an exhortation to you Israelites to Make sure you do not bear false witness. You damage yourself, you damage your reputation, and you do the same unto others. And you can drag many people down, including those who don't even know what's going on. Sticky situations. I exhort you, brethren, to make sure that if you are going to raise a report against someone, that you are 100% positive that what you saw is what transpired, whatever the transgression is that you bore witness to. And that if there were other witnesses who were in the vicinity of you, that you get together with them and in honesty and righteousness, make sure that you get their accounts as well. And that's not to say that if you are the only one who was in an area and you saw something atrocious happen, that you're supposed to keep your mouth shut. But exercise prudence, read the scriptures, read these accounts, see how to move wisely. If you raise a report, make sure it's true. And do not raise a false report. It will come back to bite you. And the Lord could very well command his angel to cut you down at an hour where you don't think will happen. With that, I say shalom, Israel. Shalom.